Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Brian Jester, co-founder here at Occupy Fantasy. About to watch a replay of our Tuesday night Twitch stream, the $1 Million Mission, Week 12 edition, where I review my previous week's 150 NFL DFS lineups from FanDuel and DraftKings. In this particular episode, we talked about my FanDuel player exposures, why I picked the number of players per position that I did this week. Inevitably, the conversation turned towards stacking and how often people are stacking the most popular and some of the least popular 3 and 4 man stacks in the largest DraftKings contest. And our co-founder Waleed joined us, so the discussion turned towards FanDuel's satellite strategy and having a plan for your NFL DFS season. Now, we also take your questions live, twitch.tv/Occupy Fantasy on these Tuesday night streams. So I encourage you to check us out live so you can get some in-depth answers on any questions you have about lineup construction for NFL DFS tournaments. So I think you'll enjoy this episode. Sit back and take some notes.
What's going on, everybody? It is Moose, Brian, and Waleed, who I forgot to say we could hear everything you were talking about during that intro, but I love it.
Oh boy.
Thankfully, we kept everything clean.
Yes, absolutely. So what's going on, everybody? This is the Week 12 edition of the $1 Million Mission, where we take Brian's 150 lineups on DraftKings and FanDuel, and we look at what he did right, what he did wrong. It's gonna be, and we look at what some of the other top pros did, see if we can learn some things or two. Before we start, however, Twitch gave us this new feature that we can do. It's called Twitch Predictions, and it allows you guys and girls to win channel points. What that means, not entirely sure. You guys who are on Twitch probably know a little more than I do. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start a prediction for 5 minutes, and the question is going to be, what was Brian's over under? What was Brian's over under? minus 40% of Brian's ROI on both sites last week.
So people have to guess yes or no, over under. Yes. Worse than negative 40%, no. Better than negative 40% ROI, which is right around the average every week. So
yeah. All right. So I just started the prediction. Let's see. Cool. So we have to confirm the prediction. Sweet. All right.
That's it.
All right, cool. So I just did it. How this works, again, I'm not entirely sure. This just came out. This is the first stream we've done since doing that. So it should be able to do that. So while we wait for 5 minutes, let's go ahead and introduce everyone. Again, Brian, we all know you at Brian Jester FF on Twitter. How you doing, man?
I'm good. What's up, Moose? I just cast my own vote on here because I know the answer. So we'll see if I get. Actually, don't even know what my actual ROI was, but I know negative 40% is right around what it usually is. So
nice. And lead at PC_lead on Twitter, Chief Meme Officer, Chief Saddy Officer. What's up, bro? How you doing?
Great, Moose. How are you, man?
I'm doing great. Chief Satellite Officer is going to be your new title because you've been in the chat with you, Brian, and I just crushing these satellites.
They're what we're all about, right, Brian? Founding pillar, Occupy. Yo, these things don't fill up all the time. Like, that's the game, at least for someone like me.
Yep. So I'm looking here at the over/under. Brian's 40%. Right now, 88% say better than 40%. You
guys have a lot of faith. My God.
Absolutely. So I guess, Brian, while we're waiting for this, we have, I think 3 minutes left. Would you summarize?
In the comment, quick question, not to interrupt you, Moose, but based off like yesterday's crazy ending with the Dick Rogers Hail Mary catch, I'm curious, like, did people benefit from that, or did they get hurt? Like, as far as our followers here.
Yeah, if you played Showdown last night, let us know in the chat what happened to you. For me, it actually ended up being roughly the same. I was like a half point away from the million on the drive before, but I was pretty much drawing dead once the Eagles got the ball back, so it didn't matter to me too much. I think I did pick up a couple tickets on FanDuel, so in the end, it overall helped me. God forbid I wasn't the guy who was in the solo milli before the Hail Mary.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, I actually faded DK and Russell in my lineup, so it didn't matter who caught that pass for me.
True. Swaglord Ken said he stacked up his channel points on this bet, so I'm pretty sure he bet against me here. Probably a smart move, Ken.
Yep. So let's check it out. And so if we take a look here, and again, we're in a new scene, so this might be a little tricky for me. But we take a look at how you did on DraftKings. Let me expand this up a little bit. 25 in entries, 17.55 in winnings for a minus 30% ROI.
Not bad. Yeah, suck it, everyone who voted against me. Let's see what I did on FanDuel.
On FanDuel, it was minus 24.66. Oh shit, that's wrong.
Wow.
24.66 in entries, 15.67 in winnings for a minus 36% ROI.
Fuck yes.
And
only time I'll ever be excited about a negative 36% ROI.
Yeah, absolutely. So congrats for not sucking that hard.
Thanks, Moose.
And if we take a look at how you've done year to date, you've done 40.3K in entries, 96.2K in winnings for a 139% ROI.
Hell yeah. So, Lee, you haven't been on here since for the $1 Million Missions, Lee. What's your thought when you see like the negative 30% ROI and then you see the year-to-date numbers?
No, I mean, it doesn't surprise me. Just based on, obviously, we talk every week, and I have a general idea on kind of how you do, but I know it's a war of attrition, man. It's going to be a lot of weeks where you're in the negative, but when you hit, that's when you got to really bring it home. And I bet on you, man, through the course of a 17 week regular season, playoff, Super Bowl. If you're 150 maxing these things, it just takes 1-2 weeks, to really put you over the top.
Yeah. Yep. It's definitely true. And Moose, we were talking about before the show started, satellites ROI, and that's not included in these numbers. This is just literally just my 150 max strategy. We talk in the chats in the Discord about people trying to qualify for the fan championship, and I think that's something we could talk about here for a little bit too, because I know a lot of our listeners and viewers, if you're watching this live on Twitch or if you're watching the replay on YouTube, we talk about it in the Discord, but I don't know if we actively talk about it as much as we should on this stream, because it really is one of the best end of year contests on FanDuel. Mm-hmm. And right now I've been trying to qualify for it. I have, I think, 46 tickets, and I've been spending a lot of money trying to get those. But right now my ROI, just based on the ticket value, is close to 200%. Wow. So Lead, you don't have a ticket yet, but I would love to hear from like a grinder strategy and standpoint of how you're trying to get a ticket and what the people listening here can do to try to get that all-elusive $250 fan championship ticket on FanDuel. For sure. Yeah, I've not found success yet. I've been really targeting the mega qualifiers, the big one that's coming up next week, which it's $33, which I have 6 tickets for. Earlier in the year, there was some previous $33 mega qualifier where I entered the same lineup twice, and I just missed the cash line by like 2 points. So that was a brutal beat. But yeah, I mean, that's just kind of the game here. I have 6 right now. I'm trying to hopefully. I won 3 actually last night on that Hail Mary, which is really nice. But I'm hoping to turn 9-10 of those things in, and I've only been like targeting this, I'd say, the last like 2-3 weeks as far as the $33 ones. But and honestly, I didn't really start playing DFS this year until probably like the week 6-7 mark, while we were still in our main event. And once our team drew dead, it was like, all right, let me get back on DFS. But really, yeah, the mega qualifiers and giving myself an opportunity on the 13th, which that's the hope, man. Maybe get 2-3 tickets in there.
That's for awesome. Sure. And Brian, I will point out, I can't remember if this was the exact same contest, but we were all talking about it, and I think we posted about it in the Discord as well. One of our Discord users hit it, but the EPE contests for these satellite tickets are crazy, not filling. There's massive overlay, and so if you qualify for those EPE contests,
no brainer. Like,
dude, you have to.
Don't play any, like, that's the first contest you enter. Without a doubt. Like, if there's anything I could recommend a beginner player, it's that right there.
Yeah, I know multiple of our members hit it. So EP is experienced players excluded, which means you have to be a beginner or don't have a badge in order to enter these satellites. And FanDuel, for whatever reason, have they been putting a ton out for the fan championship, like literally direct qualifiers, and they're not even remotely close to filling. So I know, yeah, like you said, one of our members picked up 6 or 7 at one time last night. I know another one picked up 1 or 2, and so a decent amount of our members and viewers only play DraftKings, but I would say it's worth depositing some money on FanDuel, especially if you don't have a badge over there, to at least take advantage of this. And it's not free, but at least a good opportunity to pick up a $250 entry ticket, which for most people is a massive bankroll boost, even if you min cash.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, Brian, so let's jump into it on how you did with your player pool. Should we start on DraftKings or FanDuel? What do you want to do?
I think we should mostly be FanDuel focused this week. I didn't 150 max on DraftKings. I just had 25 tickets to the 101 milli. So it's not really the same strategy as 150 max, which is what we'd like to talk about here. So maybe let's talk about my player pool and some leverage, and then we can again, if you guys have questions about any tournament strategy, go ahead and hit us up in the chat.
Yeah, as I go ahead, I've been grinding FanDuel data like hours and hours each week. So when Brian was like, "Can you just figure out my 150 exposures?" I was like, "Sure." Of course, give it to me. And again, we're here normally until about 10:30. We'll probably be over a little bit more this time. But if you have questions, definitely go ahead and ask. I am going to want to point out something later on DraftKings, so you definitely want to stay tuned for that. Get this off the screen. And
nice big market tease there, moves to keep people focused till the end of the show.
You know it. So I went ahead and here in his Google Sheet, I have Brian's player pool on FanDuel, and it's sorted by leverage. And so some of your top leverage plays: Nyheim Hines, Rob Gronkowski, Damiere Byrd, DeAndre Hopkins, Andy Isabella. You guys can see the rest.
Can you zoom in a little bit, Moose, on that?
Let's see.
Even just like does
that work?
A little browser zoom. Let me see here.
Yeah, a little more maybe.
Yeah, there we go. That'll work.
Yeah.
If you can get more, that'd be better.
Oh, it's full screen and hide our faces.
How does that look?
Perfect.
Cool. Yep. So I have it sorted there by Brian's leverage. And how do you want to comment on that, Brian?
Yeah. So if you guys have questions about the players I picked in my highest leverage, let me know. So basically, the leverage listed here is my exposure minus the field's ownership of these players. So Lead, I'll just talk to you about it. So Nyheim Hines, we talked about being one of the best value backs last week, and I didn't think he was a slam dunk. Plus, there were other value backs, so I didn't go 100% Hines, but still 50% Hines got me a ton of leverage.
Yeah, I was right there with you. So I don't make as many lineups, obviously, but between like the 6 that I make, I generally try to keep that same rule of thumb, like, hey, 50% exposure to one player, right? If that's obviously a lot. So I think I was right there with you with Nyheim Hines, just kind of put my foot down. I'll say just from my view, looking at these players, the 2 that really stand out to me are both Gronkowski and Byrd. Really, for just how much leverage you've gotten from them, those are definitely guys that I'm not surprised were in play. But compared to James Robinson, I see Chris Godwin on there, even Gabriel Davis. I'm surprised that you really like. Especially Byrd coming off that game, I guess he had.
Yeah, so the big thing for me was we projected Byrd still at 1 to 2% ownership, and I was stacking that game, so I was going to have a lot of receivers from that game and a lot of exposure to receivers there, and that's why you see guys like Hopkins and Isabella, Gabriel Davis, Jacoby Myers, Sammy Watkins, like all these guys were game stack receivers. So if they end up low owned, then I'm going to end up having a lot of leverage on them anyways. And Gronkowski was an actually underperforming tight end this week, and I wanted a lot of him, period. So that's why you see those guys there. So yeah, that a lot of times you'll end up seeing that like that.
And honestly, that shows like how cutthroat this can be, Brian. Because from the conversations like I've had with you on Gronk this year, I would be shocked. Like it's just shocking that he was the guy that you had leverage from. It's just not what I would expect.
Yeah, and when I saw him, and I was playing in the Pooch, and I had a lot of Gronkowski as well. When I saw him in this big contest at only 3%, I think they kind of lined up with the fact that he was underperforming. I guess people were off of him.
Everyone was on Waller and Kelsey for sure.
Brian, were you surprised to see his ownership that low?
Definitely surprised to see it at 3%. I mean, the guy's playing in a 56-point total game. Their underdogs are going to be passing. He has been getting the air yards in recent weeks. But it goes to show when you get leverage on a 3% owned play, like literally every catch he made in that game was shooting me up like 3,000 to 5,000 spots in a tournament. So especially when it gets down late and your game stacks are popping up and you're climbing the leaderboards and you have the lower owned pieces of a game stack like Gronkowski, like Sammy Watkins, who didn't do anything, but Gronkowski did. Every time they make a play, like you're just skyrocketing past every single lineup that doesn't have those guys.
Totally. Last thing here is the trend I see is the game stacks, right? Like we have Hopkins, Isabella, Jacoby Myers, and Bird all from the same game. We have you see some Chargers players with Mike Williams and Henry and getting some leverage probably compared to like Keenan Allen, who is a popular play. And then, Gronk, Godwin. So when I look at the whole picture, then it doesn't surprise me. It's just that there were two running backs you put your foot down on, which were Naheem Hines and James Robinson, and both turned out to be good plays for sure.
Yeah, and just before we get to all the questions in the chat, just right below this list is actually Derrick Henry too, who had like 20% up, or 19%. I really liked him too.
How did you miss that? Well, come on, you got to do better there.
There he is.
Yep. So, all right. So let's get to some of these questions. Thank you all for being patient. Ken says 38 wide receivers is a lot. No, I find myself getting around 25. So if we scroll over here, we'll see you have 38 wide receivers. You want to comment on that, Brian?
Yeah. So 72 players is a bit much. I generally try to have less than 70, that 55 to 65 range. But I actually have more running backs and tight ends and defenses than I normally have. Normally those numbers are cut down a bit. Normally I'm below 10 running backs, around 8 or so. But yeah, you have the 3 to 4 receivers per team per game stack, and then underperforming receivers, and then any high model ranking receivers. Like 30 to 40 is pretty much the sweet spot for me at receiver. I get really concentrated at the other positions though.
Yeah.
And let me ask you this, Brian. I know we have a bunch of questions to get to, but maybe this could even clear it up. But like, how many teams this week did you have exposure to 3 wide receivers or more? Yeah,
just the game stacks. Yeah, so I think it was 6 different teams. So it was the LA and Buffalo game. It was New England and Arizona, and even then I didn't have 3 New England receivers exposure, just Bird and Myers. And then Tampa Bay had 3 receivers, and then I actually didn't have 3 receivers from Kansas City. I had Kelsey, but then just Watkins and Hill. I didn't use Demarcus Robinson or Miko Hardman,
which I like for sure.
Raditar says that's a lot of Cardinals. So that was one of the teams that you stacked
every week. Dude. Every week, you can lock it in.
Yeah. Willie Ball says, as a 20 maker, how many different custom stacks should I be aiming to make per quarterback I use? I typically go 3 to 4 quarterbacks. I'll typically have like 6 lineups for a specific quarterback. So I was curious how many different stacks you would recommend making for that quarterback.
Yeah, it's tough, man. But you're doing a good job so far by limiting yourself to 3 to 4 quarterbacks. That's step one that you're doing a great job of. We said that the optimal number for.
If you're limiting yourself to 3 or 4 quarterbacks, then you're probably not playing Daniel Jones, which is a good thing. So.
Yeah, like someone on this show, I don't know who it was playing Daniel Jones this past week, but yeah. So limiting yourself to 3 quarterbacks is a good start. I would probably end up with like, I think you want like, I don't know, man. It's really tough. I would try to get a different rotation stack for each quarterback you make in 20 max. So a different custom stack. Let's just say you have 4 lineups with a quarterback. I would try to have 4 different variations of that stack, if that makes sense. So if for this Kansas City game, let's say one lineup was Mahomes, Tyreek, Watkins, running back with Antonio Brown. Mahomes, Tyreek, Watkins, running back with Rob Gronkowski. Mahomes, Tyreek, let's say Kelsey, really expensive, running back with Godwin or something. I would do 4 different ways. I would try to do each different one. Hope that you hit the right possibility of a game stack.
Yep, absolutely. And Where It's There has a question. Could you define what you mean by underperforming? Do you base that off the model or something else?
Hey, what's up, Wear and Tear? Thanks for the question. So our underperforming receiver list is a calculation that we do every week after week 4. Basically looks at a receiver's previous 3 weeks opportunity, tight ends included too, mostly their air yards, their targets, their touchdowns, or lack thereof. And we talk about this in our weekly podcast, which is on YouTube and in podcast apps. We post it in the Daily Plug. And basically underperforming receivers are guys that have had a lot of opportunity in recent weeks. For whatever reason, they haven't converted. And then on that 4th week, for whatever reason, the math works out, they have a ridiculous chance of crushing value. And we try to target those guys in our tournament lineups whenever we can.
Yeah, and I'll just point out, Gronkowski, when a tight end makes that list, like that's something that you have the eye emojis over. It's very difficult for a tight end to make that list. So I had near damn 50% Gronkowski. And I said I want him in, and that was one of the games I stacked. I said, all right, I want him in at least 40%. That's what I put in the lineup builder. Wow. A little bit higher. I think it was like 45 or 46% that I had him in, and it worked out for me.
That's why we need to review Moose's lineups instead, because Moose has finished top 50 in the Pooch Punt out of like 650,000 people in back-to-back weeks. So maybe that's a more interesting lineup study.
Yeah, it was like 860,000 2 weeks ago. I got 69th, and then last week it was 630,000. I got 50th.
And
Lee, go ahead.
Was Gronk the highest scoring tight end on the slate?
It was either him or Kelsey. They were close. Yeah. Obviously, you got those savings with Gronk.
Yeah.
Real quick, Lee, because you don't make 20 lineups, but you make less. Hitting on Willie Ball's question for like different types of stacks within the same game. What is your approach when you're making not a ton of lineups, but you're trying to get the optimal stack to fit in with your limited set of lineups?
Yeah, it's tough. I think like I usually make between 6 and 10 lineups, and sometimes like when you look at the slate, it's easy to like want a little bit of each game, and I'm trying to get better at narrowing it and maybe going with 3-4 games. So my recommendation would be this: like if you're not making, let's say, 20 plus lineups and you're only making between 5 to 10, you should still have a game in there where you like, whether it's just like your main course game, right? Like ideally last week it would have been Kansas City, Tampa Bay. But probably a game with the highest total and have multiple variations within that. Other than that, it's like if you're not making enough lineups, it's rare that you're going to have an opportunity to make like 3 lineups with each stack. But sometimes that is like, it's harder to swallow because there's more variance that comes with it, right? You're stomaching more risk. Like if you're making 6 lineups and 4 of them are Chiefs stacks, if those don't work, like your Sunday is ruined. And I think sometimes we make decisions that are in a way like prolonging to hope. Like, hey, if I get exposure to all these teams, and if one of these games goes right, I can be invested towards the stretch, which is fun. Like no one likes, being on their couch at like 3 o'clock and like, all right, this is all like, I don't have a 4 o'clock to look forward to.
Right.
True.
I do think that like it's good it increases your variance, but you may have 2-3 lineups at cash.
Yeah.
So,
yep.
Definitely. Jayhawk says, why were you overweight to Godwin instead of Evans? I thought Godwin was more expensive and higher. Jesus.
Bless you, Moose.
I tried to get that question out before I sneezed.
I think I had similar exposures to him. It just so happened I think Evans was higher owned, so the leverage was lower. Moose, can you verify that for me?
Yeah.
I think I had both at the same amount of lineups, if I'm not mistaken.
All right, so Godwin was 14.7 and Evans was 16. Yeah, so you roughly had the same.
Yeah, I actually had a little more Evans. It just so happened that
Williams I was looking at. Sorry, 14% Mike Evans.
Yeah, so the same as Godwin. Just so happened Evans was higher owned and the leverage wasn't as much. So I spread my exposure amongst most of the Tampa Bay receivers.
Absolutely.
And I will say, like, in my Chiefs Bucks lineup that I had, I did have a hard time deciding like which guy because I only made one right with them, and you're kind of deciding like, hey, which of these guys do I pick, and you ultimately end up picking the one that just fits in your lineup better. That's like the last piece you kind of plug in. So,
true.
But I don't know, like in hindsight, being 2020, I wish that I would have had more lineups.
Yeah.
Let's see here.
All right, a lot of questions here. Let's get
definitely a lot more questions here. I think we answered Willie about going 20, 20, 20, all that stuff. What's up, Dark Side? He says, are you less inclined to double stack or use bringbacks on FanDuel?
No, it's even better there, dude. 3x1 stacks all day.
It's easy.
Normally, yeah, dude, 90 to 100% of my stacks are 3x1 variety. So quarterback, pass catcher, running back with someone on the other team. So 4 total guys from the game. Only time I'll differentiate from that or veer away from that is if there is a running quarterback like Cam Newton. I did do some 2x1 stacks. And again, this for really big contests. If you're playing 100-player leagues, we've talked about in the past on here that 3x2 is actually the most optimal to get you to the top of a 100-player league. But for large GPPs, if you're 20 or 150 maxing, no, I almost exclusively go 3x1 stacks.
Yeah, that's actually the first thing I do. Go ahead, Lee.
You mean receiver 3x2? You mean like a receiver, running back / tight end from the opposing team, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Yeah, honestly, that's actually the first thing I do in DFS Magic is I set that default stack filter to 3x1, and that's just.
That's the easiest way. If you're not doing custom stacks or hand building, like just set it 3x1, let the builder make the 3x1s for you.
Yep. Random Rule says, how are you picking running backs to go with your passing stacks? So you had around 20% Henry. How did you pick what lineups you wanted with him in? Any Hill and Henry lineups?
All good questions. So I'll start from the reverse. I did have some Tyreek and Derrick Henry lineups, but they were all in Kansas City stacks or like shitty Charger stacks. So unfortunately, I didn't have the right combinations. I got a couple that were close and needed some scoring in the second half of that Kansas City game. Didn't get it. Derrick Henry, the reason I wanted more of him, especially on FanDuel, obviously he can score touchdowns, but he was facing the Colts defense that was missing 3 interior defenders, and I thought that was going to be a big change to how they were able to defend him. I didn't pick and choose which lineups I wanted him. I just wanted at least 20%. Let the builder distribute that how it may. And the way DFS Magic works, it tries to distribute players equally amongst the different stacks. So that worked out. And then, Lita, I'll answer here and ask you about picking running backs to go with passing stacks. Really, for me, it's got to be like a workhorse running back that can catch passes, or a running back that like exclusively benefits from a passing game like James White. If it's a timeshare or a guy that doesn't play in the passing game, rarely will I use them in a passing game stack.
Yeah, I know like last year there were slates where like a Tannehill, Derrick Henry, and AJ Brown stack did wonders towards the end of the season. But like this year, I don't know. I've stayed away from him. Obviously, the common sense would be like pass catching back. Like if you would think in theory, if like the Saints were healthy and it was Drew Brees, Kamara and Michael Thomas, or maybe like Austin now, like with Austin Eckler, Keenan Allen, and Herbert. That's really the only way. If you're playing the Henry game, like that could work too, but it's just there's just so much less correlation there, and you're essentially just betting on the Titans. I mean, even last week, for instance, like how many points did Tannehill get, right? Despite AJ Brown and Henry both going off. But if you stacked them in like smaller tournaments, leagues, I would probably have done enough.
Actually, it probably makes more sense to stack a running back in a 100-player league. The moves kind of the same way we talk about low risk lineups and showdown to lock up all the scoring. If a team scores 30 points and you lock up a touchdown from their receiver, running back, and quarterback, you have a pretty good chance of taking down a 100-player league. So it's probably more optimal in a smaller contest to include a running back that gets a lot of touches in a stack than it would be, a large field GPP.
There you go.
Absolutely, yeah. And speaking of stacks, that's actually what I wanted to talk about, what I mentioned earlier. And I'm actually going to hop over to Fantasy Labs contest dashboard, which we come through pretty much every week. We break down 150 lineups. You can check pretty much anyone who entered the contest, their exposures, all that stuff like that. I'm going to take a look at just the $10 Millionaire Maker on DraftKings. I'm going to go ahead and look at the Stack Seeker. We talk about this all the time. And just because I'm just flexing with Gronk, I wanted to look at the Chiefs stacks. And here, if you go with Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill, who absolutely just balled out, that's less than 10% of lineups that had just those two players in it. If you run it,
by the way, while you're pulling that up, Moose, which kind of sucked this week. If you optimally game stack like we do 3x1s, having Tyreek score 50 was actually pretty terrible for our approach because people who just did the 2-0 stacks, like Tyreek plus Mahomes, crushed us. And then people who just played Hill by himself also crushed us. So a rare week where a receiver going off like that actually hurt our chances of winning tournaments.
If one of those touchdowns from Tyreek went to Sammy Watkins, I'd take the pooch. But whatever.
Oh, see, there you go. That's what we're talking about. That sucks.
But then what I was thinking is, what were you saying, Lead?
If the only number 14 was number 10.
Yeah, I know, right? And then again, so if you're doing multiple lineups, you have this in. Maybe you want to do a 2-1 stack, or if you're trying to do a 3-1 stack. But one of the other players you should have had in there was Gronkowski. Again, one of the top scoring tight ends. Less than 0.5% had that stack.
Sheesh.
So if you have that stack, Mahomes,
that cuts it. By the way, cuts it from 10% of all lineups in the field to 0.5% if you just include one bring back on the other side. And he was underperforming, by the way.
Yeah, and a majority of these is this guy Abriza, who just put the same lineup in like 30 times. But yeah, again, it just shows that once you do that bring back, the lineup, the percentage of lineups really, really go low.
Lead. I mean, we talked about this, right? Like, people say, "Oh, this stack's going to be popular," but literally every week we come on here and we show people even if you include 3, but if you up it to 4, less than like 0.25% of the entire field has this exact stack, and you're going to be unique and have upside over the field who doesn't stack.
So let's check some other ones out quick, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you have one in mind?
Yeah, how about Herbert along with Keenan Allen and Stephon Diggs?
All right, let's see. So with Herbert, who'd you say? You said Herbert, and who else?
Keenan Allen and running it back with Stephon Diggs.
So if you run that back there, that's 1.4% of lineups.
Wow.
So not a lot. And that's not even including if you add in like Gabriel Davis or Mike Williams or whoever a cheap third option would be for that stack. So
Right.
Let's see. You add in Mike Williams, you have less than 0.25%.
There you go. What about Gabriel Davis? He was actually a pretty popular cheap receiver. So I'm curious to see if you add him to the stack, what it does.
This is FanDuel, right?
This is
Draft. Okay, got it.
So if you added Davis in, you get 0.19% of lineups.
Yeah. So there you go.
Yep.
It's.
Let's see here. Willie says, for 20 max, would you pretty much cut out your position count in half? Player pool, example, 4 to 6 running backs, 15 to 20 wide receivers.
Yeah, definitely. You got to pare it down. It sucks to cut players out, and you get to the point where you're splitting hairs to cut out your 5th and 6th and 7th running backs. But yeah, you have to do it in 20 max. I think 3 to 4 running backs is probably optimal. Maybe a couple more. Receivers, maybe a little less. Tight ends, I think you can get away with 2 to 3. And then you got your 3 to 4 quarterbacks, and then you're on your way. And if that core hits, then you got a chance at the end of the 4 o'clock games.
Absolutely, yeah. I would even lean towards lesser running backs. Lee, what do you think about that? I've always been on the field of having less running backs and having like a very small core of running backs. What do you think?
Yeah, I lean that way too, but it's sometimes harder to like execute on it, man. Like, I kind of find myself having like a tiered like approach where it's like I'll have like there's going to be 1 or 2 guys where like this week it was Naheem Hines for me, and I'm trying to think who else was kind of in that.
Was it Brian Hill or Gallman?
It was both. So I had like half of my lineups had Naheem Hines, and then a little less than half, like I'd say like a quarter of my lineups, third had Brian Hill and Gallman, and then it looked like Derrick Henry, I had him in one. Cook, I had him in one, and then so like almost like a pyramid in a sense, except like the opposite, I guess. But I don't know, like it's tougher. I'm gonna try to like stay more disciplined, but sometimes you're just where there's like 8-9 running backs. I need you guys to like do better at getting me to narrow my pool.
It's tough, dude. It's tough, man. It's tough because especially you get down to Chubb and you get down to Hunt, you get down to James Robinson. You get these guys that like, yeah.
Like James Robinson was, James Robinson was it was Naheem Hines and James Robinson that I had in half my lineups, which I was happy with. Brian Hill was a bummer, but you're right. Like it's really tough when you get the Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb, and then you get the guys where you're like, well, this matchup looks good, and there's clearly a ceiling here, but I got to pick and choose. All right, like.
Right, it does you no good to play 8 different running backs over 4 lineups or 6 lineups. Like you're just spreading yourself too thin, and it sucks. But he's got to make that decision. If you miss out on a Derrick Henry 35-point game, so be it. But it's just something you have to do to have a better chance of winning if you're entering like really large contests. That's the big key.
Yep, absolutely. And Brian, what do you think about this? Where it's like if I'm looking at running backs, I'm trying to split hairs. I'm in the lineup builder. I'll sort by projected ownership, and I don't necessarily won't even really look at the OF index. I'll say, all right, these are going to be the most popular plays. I'll look back at the model. Which one of these have the weighted opportunities higher? And I'll pick my 4 to 8, whatever I'm doing. And then once I build lineups, because I usually have to run the lineup builder like 8 to 10 times before I finalize all my lineups. And I'll look, if there's a player that I'm on the fence about, I'll look at what lineups he's in and be like, I don't know, man, this doesn't really fit as well as I wanted to do. It's causing my exposures with other players to not do so well. Let me take him out. Let me see how it is when it runs in with him. And I'll do that multiple times. What if I take this player out and bump the other player up? So it's something like that you have to do as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and again, if you're using the lineup builder, a lot of times it'll point you in the right direction.
Yeah.
If you're putting in 6-7 running backs in 20 lineups and it keeps spitting out one guy in just 4% of your lineups every time, you're like, okay, let's just get rid of this guy. Yeah. Clearly, he's not going to be in a bunch of lineups. If he blows up, he blows up. But if not, so be it.
Yep.
And one thing I'll say, I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, but with how much sharper people have gotten, usually like running backs, like the ownership is there. You know what I mean? It just seems like it's much like you're better off looking for the leverage within your stack and the 3 to 4 people versus getting cute with that running back who's like 6-7% and he could hit, but and like when the chalky options are there, sometimes like you kind of just like James Robinson was that, I think, last week. So was Naheem Hines, Brian Hill. That sucks, but he was that guy, right? He maybe making a stand on one of those guys where you're like, okay, this ownership's just way too high. I don't believe in this person. But for the most part, like you said, Moose, I got the idea when you said you just sorted by ownership and kind of compare the weighted opportunities, but that might not be a bad idea just to simplify it.
I mean, we make DFS really hard sometimes, but we can make it easy. Like that for running backs and tournaments, it can be on autopilot and just picking guys who have a lot of weighted opportunities for their price. And over the course of an entire week, the entire industry think he's going to do well, and he probably will because he's a running back. So,
yeah, and as it points out, with even with high ownership, if you're stacking, look, our only 0.2% of the lineups are going to have that same core as you. So it doesn't matter if you have a 90% running back or anything like that. You're still fine. Excuse me. Random Rule says, I saw your Browns passing stack in the $101 Millionaire Maker. How many Brown stacks did you have, and how did you get on them?
Yeah, so I only played them on DraftKings because they were super cheap, and the prices are a little difficult on DraftKings. We talked about in the past about having cheaper stacks over there. For me, it was twofold. It was the fact that game total increased by 2.5 points, and it was up to 50, one of the highest totals of the week, and no one was really talking about it. And both defenses were decimated by injuries or COVID, which was probably a big factor in the total increasing 2.5 points. So Jacksonville was missing a bunch of corners. Cleveland was missing like 4 or 5 guys. And I figured Cleveland, coming out of like 3 or 4 straight games in terrible weather, going to Jacksonville could potentially shoot out. And so I had it in like 20% of my 25 lineups over in the 101 millionaire. So
cool. All right, so it's been 15 minutes past our, I almost said bedtime. That's past our stream time. But I do like to get through these last couple of things. Lead, one of the first things one of the main things we like to look at here is duplicate lineups, and this is in the Millionaire Maker. What lineup was the most duplicated, and why we think it came to that? So again, there's another feature in here called duplicate lineups. You can press, and
so these are lineups that literally people had the same of.
Yeah. So in this case, this lineup, 116 users had this lineup in the Millionaire Maker.
So crazy.
So was there any correlation here?
Let's see. Mahomes, Cook, Hines, Diggs.
Yeah, that looks like a crazy cash game lineup. Like,
yeah, exactly. That's all that is.
Yeah. New Orleans defense. The other one with 111 duplicates use the full salary cap. Again, yeah, pretty much that. Again, as Brian, we talk about, this is just someone just going to whichever optimizer and just clicking optimize without doing any settings.
Yeah, whatever big optimizer out there, labs, grinders, fantasy cruncher, whatever it is. We get this question all the time. How does your lineup builder optimize lineups? Like, no, because that's how you end up with the same lineup as 200 other people in the millionaire, because people just click optimize on your projections. Whatever, they don't even do any research, and they'll throw that lineup in the biggest contest, and they get duped with 200 other people.
Really fun.
One of these times I just wanted to hit just for the troll purpose. It's like, all right, 130 people tied for the Millionaire Maker, and you get like $50.
It got really close one year. The train was up there for a long while in the 4:00 games. It was like a 200 way tie for the Millionaire, which would have been absolute chaos.
That's so funny. Wow.
And then the other thing we'd like to look at is salary distribution. Again, basically 50% of the lineups use the full salary cap. Like 95% of the users used 500 or less. And lead, this is what I do in the setting is I make sure that my min salary cap is 49.5, or I don't spend overspend by $500 or more dollars if I'm playing in a tournament like that.
You're saying you make sure that 500 is the most you leave on the table? Or?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, and do you have any opinion on that, or?
I don't play 150 lineups, so it's hard for me to say. But from my something that's taken me some time to transition as a DFS player is being okay leaving 400, 500 on the table. I hand build, so it's a lot harder for me to do that. But this past week, 300, I feel like between 200 and 400 is my sweet spot. But at the same time, given FanDuel's generous pricing, sometimes I do find I don't feel bad if I have only 100 or even totally filled up my salary, just because I know I'm still game stacking and I'm still differentiating. It's not like I'm just mashing the more plays.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Willie asked, "What time is the showdown stream?" Really appreciative of that.
Yeah. So assuming all the COVID tests come back good tomorrow, Baltimore and Pittsburgh play at 3:40 Eastern. Moose and I have to discuss, but it'll be an hour to 2 hours before game time. We'll let you guys know early tomorrow morning what time we're doing the live stream.
Definitely. And then the last thing we like to look at is the position usage. This is the percent of flex position distribution. So in this case, in the Millionaire Maker, 52% use the wide receiver, 37% use the running back, and 10.5% use the tight end.
10.5% of lineups is burning money.
It's crazy. Well, Brian, talk to me about this, because I know this is something I feel like it's a pretty general rule of thumb that you got to go running back there. Is that something do you hold that as a rule? When you make 150 lineups, and, can you explain to people the logic behind it?
Yeah, really what it comes down to me for is how many good running back plays there are. If there are a lot of really good high-value running back plays, I'll end up with a lot of running back in flex. Or weeks where, it's a lock-butting running back week, min price Jalen Samuels, min price Jamal Williams, or whatever it is. Then I'll end up with a lot more. Yeah, or even Hines. Yeah, Hines even. Hines and Hill and Cook and Henry. All these guys could certainly fit the mold there. But I don't try to jam it anymore. Early on, I was thinking that, especially on FanDuel, but receivers still have a ton of upside too. So I'm not really trying to force the ball over there. Yeah.
What's the difference between FanDuel and DraftKings there? Given the PPR scoring and the bonuses as well.
Yeah, it's just the bonuses and PPR, and a lot of times you can get cheaper options on DraftKings. I think you just end up having a more balanced lineup with four receivers instead of 3 running backs over on DraftKings.
Yeah.
And again, just to show you that this double tight end play is square AF. So 10.5% used it in the Millionaire Maker, but we like to jump over to. We can even jump to the 101, and we'll see that decreases to 8.5%. Tight end using the flex, and we look at the.
We're using receiver. I honestly thought I had this a little backwards. I thought more people were using the running back at the flex.
We see it on different weeks. This week, I think wide receiver is a little heavier than it normally is.
Yeah. But yeah, usually it's a lot closer, and running back will take the lead sometimes. And then at the 4,500, the Mega Millionaire, 7% used it, and in the 3K, which is very sharp, only 1% of the people use the tight end.
Imagine paying $4,500 and putting 2 tight ends in your lineup.
But the receiver distribution was a lot greater. So is this people that are fading like some of the value running backs? Is that what's happening? Like the Brian Hills and the Gallmans and the Hines are getting less ownership here?
I don't know if we can look at the ownership here. I think it just gets way more concentrated.
I don't know the logic of it.
So,
or is it a lot of people mashing these $3,000 receivers in their lineup?
It could be that too.
So, like, Laz Gets Fit won this contest. So let's.
No shit. Did he really?
Yeah. And so.
Laz Gets Fit. By the way, we had an entire show on this guy last year. He has, when he won 50 maxes, he has like 130 people in his player pool, and he just matches the field on every single player. He plays like 30 quarterbacks, like 30 tight ends. This dude's won like really big GPPs like 10 or 15 times in his life. It's the craziest DFS story.
So like he didn't have any Naeem Hines, no Brian Hill. For running backs, he just had Zeke, Antonio Gibson, and Duke Johnson.
Oh, this is the Thanksgiving slate. That's why.
Oh shit, that's why.
I was saying Zeke.
Rip. I was about to say, okay, yeah, they got me confused with Thursday slate.
And Laz Gets Fit is really Galaxy brain. Not even playing running backs on the slate.
I'm actually curious now. I do want to see him in the $10. Did he play in the $10 one? Yeah, 126 players.
This guy is. It blows my mind. Like, this guy has literally won hundreds of thousands of dollars in DFS doing this strategy, and I can't figure it out to save my life.
Playing everybody.
Yeah, like he played like legit like 20 quarterbacks.
And he's won. I swear to God, he's won many contests.
Like, yeah, some of these plays are just like insane.
Yeah, and it just seems like he matches the field on a lot of things, and it works out for him. So I mean, more power to him. Not shitting on him, just crushing it.
Oh, that's good.
Question here from Raditar says, kind of off topic, but are you guys planning on adding more sports to the optimizer/model?
Yeah, good timing. NHL, we're going to add to the optimizer. NBA's already there, obviously. MLB next spring when MLB opens up. And then they also plan is to add some esports to the lineup builder. So be on the lookout for that.
Definitely. So cool. Before I take us out of here, Lee, do you have any last thoughts you want to talk about or anything like that?
No, other than, obviously the WFFC fan championships coming up. Hopefully one of us takes it down. Hopefully I take it down, but not me. Hopefully one of the Occupy family does. And I'm going to, really hone in on just keeping it narrow this week and maybe picking a stack to make up for a third of my lineups.
Love it.
Any last thoughts, Brian?
No, I don't think so. Just again, Wednesday, if you're watching this live, we'll be live with the Showdown stream. Then we'll be live on Saturday with the Week 13 preview. In addition to all the other content, OccupyFantasy.com. Yep.
And if you have any more questions about Brian's lineups or construction, anything like that, remember we are in the Discord, so go ahead and check that out. If you're watching this replay on YouTube, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and the bell notification to be notified when we upload new videos. If you're here on Twitch, hit the follow button. But until tomorrow, Moose and Brian and Waleed from Occupy Fantasy, have a good night.
Good night.